Okay. Hi, everybody. This is the first time we've tried three people, so I have zero idea how it's going to look on YouTube, but we'll do our best. Look pretty good the three of us are on Zoom screen just because on YouTube, there's this phenomenon where we can watch ourselves talk, but it's about a split second later than we see our mouth move, and it can be quite a source of distraction. I was very nervous before I came on today, not performance anxiety, more like so much energy in me about today and about, here I'm going to do it. I am going to cry. I tried to talk to them before I got on so I could avoid crying, but it's just meant to be. So there we go. So the reason I'm crying is because these two people matter more to me in my own health. And there's one other than anyone. And I have been through a huge level of embodiment over the past years, and everything that's going to be spoken today by Heather and Michael, I've lived. And I think some of you that are watching have had the opportunity to live also. And it's really this reformation inside of the consciousness of unity within our physical form. And there's just no way the consciousness of unity within our physical form isn't going to become the conscious of unity in our physical world. There's just no way. It doesn't matter what it looks like now. Everybody's run a fever. You know what it's like on the other side. And so it's just very moving to have both of them on today. I want to start with a story because I know some of you haven't been on today. And basically how Create a World started was over a year ago when we weren't doing it. And we were finding ourselves in conversations, which would have been how a tribe would have operated. We would have shared stories at night around the kitchen table. We wouldn't have been on our cell phone. We would have found out that we were sharing something, that something was rising, what in the field of Tantra Maat we call in the field, in the mind of creation. Mm-hmm. And we were gaining its language. We were gaining its ability for us to partner with it and us be present to it, because we would work out a kind of coherency in our sharing, not to find an answer. It's not that model. It's not that type of world, because when you find an answer, the answer's outside you. But when you become aware, it's inside you. And the application of your awareness becomes not only for you, it also becomes with the people that you are in conversation with. So we have been in several conversations together with no, that's the word I want, not as academics, although they qualify as academics for sure, and not as authorities, but as people that have been fascinated by the integration or the awakening of the flesh back into its spirit, is my terminology. And so this today for me is kind of like a celebration to be able to have this conversation. Heather said before she got all her mind was totally blank. And of course, our Zen Michael, there he is. So here we go. We're off and running. So before we start, I just want to say one thing. I didn't realize. So back in 1996, many of you know I had a God event. I actually thought it was God. And like a child would think that they met God. And the one statement he made about these times was have them not be afraid. But I didn't realize at the time he said that. I thought it meant to comfort people as we're becoming one again, as our energy fields are surging into a new level of capacity and coherency and cohesion. And but he meant it more than that. And every day this time we're in now occurs, I wake up going, oh my goodness, what he meant was there's no reason, not only is there no reason to be afraid, he was actually probably not speaking to our identities. He was probably speaking to our biology. He was probably saying that that there's a different framework of being inside ourselves that is more accurate to who we are. And there's no reason to be stirred up by stories that have to complete themselves when we're actually in a new love song, we're in a new story. So it's very profound for me this morning. I also recommend, if you can get to Disney Plus, everybody watch Free Guy. It is completely the story of what we're experiencing now. It is super, super cool. All right, I'm going to turn it to Heather. Heather, the conversation I asked him to start was when in the field of Tantra Maat, we read matrix words. And in a book that Heather's writing with me and is rematrixing the frequency of the word medicine so we can pull it out of the past and bring it into the future is a valuable word that operates on behalf of the powerful unity of the human body and the human mind. So I've asked Heather and Michael just to give an experience that they carry or something they want to presence about that. So over to you, Heather, and then you turn it over to Michael.
Okay, thanks. Well, I love that intro. Every time I listen to you talking, I get something new. And so I just really appreciate that. So I started paying attention to the word medicine as a word a few years ago when the name vitality medicine came to me as a field that I could develop. And I was really surprised with the word medicine because I was raised by a chiropractor, an alternative healthcare model. But I also feel very strongly, but then there should be maybe not a surprise because I also feel strongly that we need to bridge these supposedly, different alternative models and figure out a way for everything to work together in a complementary way. And so when I researched the word medicine and what it meant, it actually means to take appropriate measures. The med is it means to take appropriate measures, which honestly to me really resonates because it shows real agency and activity. And I feel like our bodies are innately vital and we do come in innately whole and they have this miraculous homeostasis inbuilt capacity that helps us return to balance, but they also need tending. And so in that tending, that's where I see the taking appropriate measures and really taking an active role, both in our own lives and also from a medical or healing perspective, that we take appropriate measures and that we're proactive about our health and our healing, and that we find practitioners who don't just sit around waiting for the body to heal itself or following all the body's natural processes, but know kind of when to interfere and when to put in a new input, and then also when to hold off and try to figure out what kind of input the body needs without blowing it out. And what input, like not to limit ourselves to say cranial sacral therapy, but if you need pharmaceutical medicine, go get pharmaceutical medicine. If you need surgery, go get surgery, and finding a place for everything. And then there's also a definition that comes from the Native American, a man named Bear Hawk, Ken Cohen, that says, Native American medicine is based on widely held beliefs about healthy living, the repercussions of disease-producing behavior, and the spiritual principles that restore balance. So that's, and then the other part of that is magical influence, something supposed to possess curative, supernatural, and mysterious power. So I also love that aspect of medicine. And though I have absolutely no training in that really speaks to me because there is this partnership with what Tantra was talking about at the beginning, the spirit and the flesh. And in the Western world, sort of reuniting that, which is so weird to me that would be at all separate. And in Eastern traditions, it's not. But for us, it's quite separate. And let me see. Yeah, so that's basically my thoughts on medicine.
Well, for me, I think Tantra touched on an idea from God, apparently, of a love song. And for me, that's what medicine is. It's a love song. It helps us restore or restory to our innate harmony, our innate innocence, and our imaginative creative potential. From the Ayurvedic tradition, medicine has two purposes. One is to allow a being to remember their awakened state, to be able to do spiritual practices and such things required for being whole. And the other purpose of it is to use the process of healing as a spiritual practice. So medicine, in a sense, is a noun and a verb. It's the song and the singing of love.
I just got to say, here I go again. This is just going to be my weepy create a world time. I often say to people, I'm not people-centric, I'm feel-centric. And it kind of stops the show because people don't know what I mean. And it's not descriptive, but it's what you just said, Michael. It's creation's love song. In spiritual work, you'll get a Shakti rise, you'll get a Kundalini rise or a Shakti event. And our present nervous systems are used to being much more dulled down, not so amped up. So a couple of times I said, I feel like a racehorse that just can't calm down. I loved it. I got to say, I loved it. And then my system tanked. It just tanked. And then in the medical system, my TSH, normal TSH is 0.6 to 0.8. My TSH, which is thyroid, and somebody can comment on what that is more, but it actually went to 5.37, which is not really too cool. And but the conversation, I'm going to fast forward. So she shifted my medication up just a little bit. She's really amazing. And but I'm very fierce about my body. So I came after her with everything I had, as I have a tendency to do when I'm at risk with my body. And we ended up having a conversation a few days ago, which is really a field phenomenon. And, there's something about being in the actual feeling, just even if you make it up. The body doesn't know any difference between making it up and it being what you call real. Even if you just make it up, that the body's in its awakening state and you get to be its advocate, it just changes the energy, the water you're swimming in. It makes you swim, your water, this field phenomenon of energy shifts into being that water, I guess you'd say. So we had a conversation, which I wanted to bring to the call. And I just did this whole conversation in my head about she's got to get, I have these amped experiences with spirit, or beings. She's got to be able to help me there. So so then she calls 5 seconds later, this doctor, and she's coming at me like a train. And of course, I loved it because fierce to fierce is pretty happy making for me. It shows commitment and, and understanding one's skill set. It has a beautiful energy behind it. And so she said, I have an MD after my name. Do you know what MD means? She said, MD means that we find what works medically. It doesn't mean I'm committed to Armor, which is a medication, or Levo, or nothing. It means I'm in charge of finding what works. And of course, she's probably about 32, yelling at this 75-year-old woman. It was very, very life enhancing. And I said to her, look, I have to call her Dr. Lisa because I can't pronounce her last name. I said, look, Dr. Lisa, here's the deal. You and I are both fierce. We're fierce. Your commitment to my well-being and my commitment to my well-being are very obvious in this conversation. And that's what I trust. And I said, but you need to know that I am not going to go forward unless we have a way to monitor the fact that I'm amping and the fact that I'm scaling and that the fact that one of the things that happens is the thyroid can get in jeopardy about that. And she says to me, just my point, she says to me, I promise you, but she says it in like lioness roar language. She says, I promise I will take care of the medical end of this, but it is your job and not mine to take care of the spiritual end of this. And it just demonstrates everything that Heather was speaking to and saying, but it also demonstrates, which is why we're doing Create a World. If you can get something present, then the parts of you the part of you, which is not just your personality, believe me, if we left it to our personalities, we'd probably be in, I can't say that word, shite shape. And, but something in us remembers unity. Something in us remembers RE-members, and will re-member. And just by being present to something when everything operates on behalf of everything else. And so even my precious little lioness, my endocrinologist, she's my perfect endocrinologist. And because it's in the field, not because I'm lucky, because when you begin to operate in a phenomenon of unity, when your cells begin to remember, then everything starts to correlate with that. The hard part for me in this conversation is that's what field centricity is. That's not I centricity. That's not personality centricity. The personality still pretty much operates in a psychological paradigm that is always assessing what's right and what's wrong, not being present to what there is to be present to, opening up into what there is to open up into, and having what there is to have. So I'm just throwing it out to either of you. Off we go.
I think also what I heard, Tantra, was something that I'm super fascinated with, and what originally drew me to work with you is the something in us remembers unity. And one of my favorite intake questions, though I don't always ask it, is, do you have a memory of wholeness for somebody? And usually people say, yeah, but then when we talk about when was the last time you felt truly, healthy, normal, vital, sometimes it was a very long time ago. But I always am looking for kind of that magic key and the different ways in which to help the cells remember, and how that can be either gentle and in a very integrated form, like on in a craniosacral treatment, or how it can kind of storm in and take over and cause alarm and panic in a system, or a depression, and just playing around with like looking for that magic. I mean, sometimes when I'm working on someone, I think, okay, where's the magic area that just once we reach together, everything's just in a turn on. So that's what was brought up for me.
It just reminds me of I always go back to, and I've used it well, two things. One is, Michael, your conversation about in formation, that conversation, if you could speak to that, but also the fact that when you go in the Albuquerque, was it Albuquerque? No, the Texas airport, when I was in the Texas airport, they had this whole display, like an art display, and it showed how you could read a paragraph with missing words and missing letters in the words, and yet you read the whole paragraph perfectly. And it really gave me incentive. So now everywhere I write in dash formation because by splitting the word, it takes people out of missing the word, getting the word right. And so it's been fun to play with language that way because 90% of how we have to get in the door now with ourselves is not through what we already know. And simply by breaking something up, it starts to make some space for something else to occur. But if you could just speak to that, Michael, it was one of my favorite conversations. Anything you have to say.
Yeah, well, so the field of information is a translation, and I'm not the first person to use that, but it's a really good translation of the word in Sanskrit, akash, which is ether or space. And truly, space itself is full of information. It's what dictates the way that form becomes and shifts. So basically, all potential for form already exists in space itself. So that would be an overview, a definition, if you will, of information. And from that field, all phenomenon have certain processes and growth and evolution patterning that unfold. And so there's this concept we're talking about right now of remembering, of this far off idea of unity, or this past idea of unity. But all of that is already in the field of information. And most of what we see as non-unity is just a step in the evolutionary process. There's a left foot, right foot step that occurs, a coming together, a differentiation, a moving toward oneness, a moving toward infinity, so to speak. And the field of Akash, or information, is holding all of those processes already. It's already part of our model. And so there was really nothing disharmonic about disunity in a way. In identity as an individual, there's nothing particularly disharmonic about that. The thing is, if we move with just one foot, we can't really move forward. And so it's really a left foot, right foot experience of evolution, unity, differentiation. And that would be the ones and zeros of the matrix, sort of the binary existence as you see it, really holds it all. And the language of information is more complex than ones and zeros, but we could definitely touch on that subject deeper and tease out the complexity there.
Anything for you, Heather?
I actually have a question, which is, I mean, so working with the information, like the etheric and the creation exercises work with how do you crave in that which is not yet matter into form. One of the things I think of with them. And so that's something that, I think we're all doing all the time, to varying degrees. And I'm curious, both of you, one of the things that Tantra and I have been in conversation about for a long time is a new model of healing, and what is the new model of healer, or of medicine holder, or of practitioner. And Michael, I've never actually asked that question of you, but I'm curious to know how you think of that and how you hold your role as. in let's say a new model of healing.
Yeah. Well, I think the new quote unquote model of healer is able to see the spiral of evolution and meet people where they are on that spiral. There's sort of concentric circles of spiraling evolution, and each person is at a different level of development there. And so the language of one level of development will sound foreign and confusing and may even lead to depression or something along those lines in a being who isn't ready for it. So I think they're really able to step outside of their own evolutionary process and the greater evolutionary process and meet people where they are. That's paramount. And yeah, having childlike innocence, play, and creativity alive in them is really important, as it is important in evolution in general. And I think a clear understanding of certain fundamental truths about the universe is really important too. And some of those fundamental truths, again, are appropriate for certain people, but are not necessarily worth sharing to other people, or even could be damaging to share. But one of those truths would be sort of the illusory nature of a self, that the self is it's interdependent on all other life, and it does not exist outside of a field phenomenon, does not exist outside of humanity. It exists as a part of a larger whole. And so the idea of being whole and yet part of a larger whole, that is really important for a practitioner. And so if a being is able to hold that consciousness and meet a person where they are, then I do see there's certain other benefits, like really truly understanding the connection between the psyche, our psychology, and our body, our physicality, our anatomy and physiology. Really truly noting that they're not just theoretically connected, but that they're truly the same thing. I think that's really important for, quote unquote, the new practitioner to understand.
It's also why this call, the last piece you said, is that, and for the people listening in, we have to work it out as it's moving right now. Because, I mean, it's why I have a small group, because I am a tip of the wave type person. And usually about 99% of the population is not capable, or I wouldn't want to scare them by paying attention to the front end, by paying attention to the tip of the wave. But I also did that experiment, from 2014 to 2021 to really see if people could operate inside of self, actually, the way you just defined it, operate as in an experience of a loka, where they are, their loka, and also being part of creation, both and. And it can't be taught, as near as I can tell. It can be lived. But if I consider myself a practitioner, and I just know when I can take somebody on, and I know when I can't. So that's why I can't put a banner over my door, because I'm not consistent. It's not something I can have a consistency with. But that's the part that I've really latched on to what you said. But it's also, it started to create a world, because the people regulate their attention, so they can come on, they can listen, And if they're not attracted to it, they can go away, because the people, they have to regulate their attention, because what I've noticed literally in the last month is the body becomes completely attentive the minute you're paying attention. And if you're paying attention to something that's too big for you, as Heather was speaking to, your biology is starting to go, not yet, because it's our wonderful braking system. It says, you're not ready yet, back off, go wash dishes, please, now. And I think this is my greatest excitement right now. And also my greatest, not concern, what would the word be? Like a finesse. There's a moment, we're in a moment of finesse right now. We have to finesse this in my world.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you all are experiencing, because it seems like the body, and which for me, the definition is the unity of spirit and flesh, not the corpse, and is instantly responding to right, not right like truth. Somebody help me with language after I get this out of my mouth. But is responding to right information. Like it takes it in whole now. It doesn't take it in through trauma, which is, it's not filtering through trauma. I'm going to cry again. Sorry, I just can't. I'm so excited about what's happening right now. And we just have to navigate it. We just have to tend to it, because it's like Muktananda in his book, Playing Consciousness, which saved my life because it explained me like nothing else had. And he said, to be in the hands of a guru, but it's not just a guru, it's a teacher, it's a practitioner, that as your system starts to come back online, there's this loving care of welcoming it back. And I know that's where we're at. And then I go through an emotional pain when I hear this stupid psychological interpretation that comes with it. And people aren't stupid, but the inundated of something's wrong with me, something's wrong with it, something's wrong, is a very different conversation than monitoring an awakening or monitoring an emergence or considering that you're in an emergence. And in years and years ago, one of the things in the field of Tantra Maat is transparency. Everybody gets to say what they say. That's it. It's not like trying to harm people. It's just don't suppress, because your system can get awake if you don't suppress. And we had this one person, Pauline, and everybody was being so properly spiritual. Well, she came in and like roared. She was in agony. She wanted out of her marriage and she was terrified for her kids. And you just watched the fragmentation of humanity's system come back into a fractalization, because she got everybody's attention and we were all in the roar. And we're in another roar, but it's not agony. But it can be agony, because on the biofeedback machine, agony and ecstasy, they have the same register. It's all a matter of how you're tending to it, how it's being tended to. And what I heard in your question, Heather, was, we have a responsibility how we tend to it, because we took on the responsibility.
Yeah. Michael, are you okay with me responding to Tantra?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So
always.
Tantra, I love when you said, I always take notes, you know that of me, but the body is attentive when paying attention. And if you pay attention to what's too big for you, the body slows you down. And when you went
the body slows down. Yeah. And it looks like it slows you down.
So
be clear.
When you had that experience in New Mexico, your TSH went to over 5 or something, that was your thyroid literally slowing you down.
Yes.
So we have evidence of this, which I think is really exciting. And I loved also the moment of finesse, because we don't like, I think, maybe I should say this for myself, I do not have the intelligence yet of monitoring an emergence and having the right registers of what is healing, what needs to be tended to, what is dis-ease, what is actually just the body re-regulating itself. And you and I had a few conversations around this with what's the practitioner that monitors when you're actually healing, like when you don't need medication anymore, or because normally practitioners work with you when you're sick, but what if you actually are well and then you're going for optimal vitality, right? So
that's how I torture you and Michael. Isn't that how I torture you and Michael?
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, I'm emergent.
Yeah,
get in there.
So that moment
make
of
it
finesse,
fast and easy.
right? That moment of finesse feels really important because we are finessing right now. We're facing what I'm facing in my body and my practice is people are actually really healing, and it goes really, really fast. And so in a way we have to, and not everyone, but in a way I have to recalibrate my own brain, because it's like, well, is it really that easy? Are we really done with this? Like, how do I, and then my anxiety comes in, is like, how do I make sure this doesn't come back? How do I make sure I'm being responsible if I recommend this person do this instead of that, but it is a really neat moment of finesse.
That's great.
I think there, Tantra touched on something that's really important for that, Heather. She talked about the concept of guru.
Mm-hmm.
And really, truly, the guru, their purpose is only to awaken the inner guru, the listening ear in the heart, which really what it's listening to is that entire field of information, the Akashic realm and the more subtle realms. And so I don't know if your brain or your intelligence need to really pick up the cues, if your heart can pick it up, if your deep wisdom can pick it up. Wisdom in the like Sophionic sense, in the in sort of the divine sense of wisdom. Again, the listening, the ear in your heart, the eyes in your heart. If that can see what the person is needing, then you don't really need all of that beautiful development of brain, that cerebral temple that you have there. You don't really need that in that moment. Of course, that will, in the feedback loop, be informing the field of information, and it's really valuable to have that, the pages and pages of wisdom that are there. But yeah, it's that subtle listening, which I know that you are also quite attuned to, Heather. That is the skill that allows you to know what the patient is needing, and if what you're doing will need to end, if you're finished, or if there's more to do, and typically there's always more to do. My goal with patients is to make myself obsolete, so that they have that awakened inside of them, and don't really need me as the interpreter anymore. But I think there is always room as a practitioner to keep assisting in that process.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation with my Rolfer yesterday, because, and what I heard Tantra say at the beginning is she uses, you and I to help her track. And then I love this idea of, loving care and welcoming back the system coming alive. But that's what, my goal is as a practitioner, is I use my hands and my ears to really listen and feel where a person's body is, so that when things start changing, I am aware of that. And then I can help make sense of that to them. And then my Rolfer does that for me. But it's hard to find a practitioner that really does hold you in a more, like, I want to say, felt sense than just as a body. And for me, I love having my hands on someone because I get a lot of information that way. But there's something around how we track our own bodies, and also how we track our patients in their process. And so there's lots of different outcome markers. And I love trying to think of outcome markers that wed that spirit and flesh and things like that. But but one of my main outcome markers for myself is just flow, and how a body. And I was talking to Tim Myrolfer about this yesterday, and he actually has training also in cranial sacral therapy. So he was talking about the cranial sacral rhythm and tracking that flow. And I definitely track a flow through the body as primary importance, and how that flow is either flowing or not flowing, and how strong it is, and all of that. And Michael, I'm curious. So this is all just emerging for me as far as what the new healing practitioner, like how we track and how we hold that space for somebody to embody or in whole or remember their wholeness, or however we want to say it. But I'm curious how you track and how you think about that.
I want to add something before Michael speaks, because I think it's really, I don't want it to get missed. And that is that the practitioner can meet a human being at the gate, but the person, my whole interest in this time is one of the, see, Michael, it really is my throat that's busy about itself right now. But that inner guru is what I want to retouch, is that for all of you on this call, please don't fall into the trap of we're authorities, because we've done a lot of work. But if you can't maintain your own guru-ness with us, we're not for you. If you don't wake up into your own wisdom, if you don't wake up into your own ability to track. So when Heather's talking about tracking and Michael's talking about tracking, how they track, you have to be able to gain access to that for yourself, because I am accurate. And there's a reason I'm a seer, which people know. One of the funny things is people go, wow, you actually are psychic. I say, oh, yes, I am actually psychic. Thank you for sharing. But it's because you as a people, it's your intelligence, it's in your body, yours. And it's your direct link with creation that is yours. And your practitioners need to be able to wake that up for you. And nothing's wrong with them. It's just that they're not in your tune. They're not in your song. But because when you hit that practitioner, regardless of their tradition, that's in your song, you can translate anything. Because my last words to Dr. Lisa, I would call her, were, here's what I need to take care of my spirit. I need a TSH test every 4 weeks. And she said, got it. Score. We're in the door. She can do her thing. I can monitor my thing, and I can learn. And the young woman working with me, I would rather say, I told her to go back to her social worker and tell her she has to have a full thyroid panel, because she thinks she's having trouble getting over addiction. She's not. She's caught in a feedback loop that's biological that we just need to get her out of. That comes out of being with Heather and being with Michael and listening. And I now have registers for things that lets me say to her, please go get a full blood panel. I've got people that can read it. We can get this agony off of you of why you keep flicking back into addiction, because it isn't all addiction. Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of moving in this kind of conversation. We're not working in theory, we're living it. And we're on this call together so we can live it with you. And you can live it with us. And we can all discover together and talk about a feedback loop. One of my favorite words now. Talk about a feedback. Our feedback loop is to look for an authority outside ourselves. Mm-hmm. No, we want to look for an authority that awakens ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, thank you, Michael, for the commercial pause.
Well, that's good. I can juggle two concepts at once now. tie them together. So authority and flow. So authority, it's your ability to author your story. And that is actually my metric for flow. One of, at least. I mean, certainly you can check other ways of flow, feel someone's pulse, or monitor their urine or their feces, or, there's like a lot of different tangible physical ways to monitor flow. And the 4 states of flow would typically be excess flow, decreased flow, blocked flow, and flow out. Well, those are the 4 diseased ways, sort of, or disharmonic flow rates. And really any symptom can be tracked to that. But yeah, the way that I'm looking at authority and flow together is, what stories is a person telling themselves? If their stories are still really self-limiting, then there's some groove that their flow is falling into. And in Sanskrit, we use a word called samskara. And you can think of it quite like grooves on a record. And habitual patterns, be they addiction to some physical substance, or just a thought pattern, or just our commute every day, something that we're doing regularly puts a groove into our energetic field. You may realize that you could probably drive to work without ever really paying attention to that drive. You've done it so many times. There's a mechanism that just unfolds and brings you there again. You're following a path that is pulling you. And I think one of the main goals of this, the song of healing, is to shift those grooves and to allow the person to write new ones. And all of us, to some degree, really have these self-limiting stories that we perpetuate. And so, you can hear it in someone's candor, in their intonations, and just in the words that they're using, whether they're still holding themselves back or not. And not that it's necessarily their fault. That there's oftentimes trauma or certain things that have been enacted upon them that have caused this groove to form. But certainly, it's really actually not that hard to rewrite. It's really not. I mean, there's a lot of self-limiting belief about how hard it is to shift. And so what you're seeing in practice, Heather, with people almost healing too easily, it's okay. I think it is. I mean, it really, we, like the Grateful Dead say, we really don't have that far to go. It's really true. It's hard to believe sometimes. And I know when someone's in a sort of a healing crisis, quote unquote, it's really hard to believe. But it isn't that far to go. And one really important metric is knowing the difference between spiritual bypassing and actually just stepping into ease and grace. And still, I think the metric there is story. How are we writing this myth of our lives? What words are we choosing? And what depth is behind those words?
Michael, this really makes me think of the creation exercises, because in the craving exercises, you are writing the myth of your life. You're claiming what you want. So that's really neat. I have another question or topic, which is based on results. So again, Tantra and I have sort of had these discussions for years, because she was the first one about 6 years ago that said, to me. It really is okay if you want a result. Like if if you want to go after something and you do that, because in the alternative healthcare model, especially cranial sacral, you just follow the body and you trust the patient's wisdom of their body, and you just follow it, and you just sort of hold space for that body to do what it needs to do. And what I found pretty soon was that could just take me into all these patterns that they have developed as coping mechanisms, and it actually was driving me nuts. And so I learned this technique from Carol Gray to actually like create a stop, and then the body reformulates and moves to the next. And so I became more, I would say, results driven, in that I wanted a certain result from, and I would say working with Tantra gave me the space to be results driven, like wanting a certain thing out of a session. Like I have goals with the body. And yet that's still, I just met with this really lovely woman. She's near 80, that I learned of through my Rolfer in Santa Cruz. And she was directly trained by Otto Rolf. And so she and I had an hour-long chat. And one of the things she said was, that she doesn't go for a specific result. Like she was doing this whole, which I agree, as a healer, we are a catalyst, which I totally agree. That's a word I use often. But that she didn't want us, like she didn't hold on to a specific result, which I understand. But in a way, it took her out of the equation. And I really questioned her about that. And I said, well, aren't you, you're looking at one of the things with Rolfing, they have you stand and you look at posture and how gravity is affecting the body and how the body's compensated. And she looks at me before and she looked at me after. So I said, well, don't you think that that is a result you're going for? And what do you think about that? And it was really neat to see her. I just think there's new language that needs to be, and understanding that needs to be formulated around result. So I'm curious how you think about that as a practitioner, because I get the wisdom of the different ways, but I again feel like there's some new conversations that need to be had.
Well, I think there's sort of relative goals that we have, and then there's ultimate goals in a way. I would say the ultimate goal of mine is to help someone be reborn into their fully awakened capacity, Buddha nature. And that is something that can never come from just pure result orientation. It's just a breakthrough that happens. And there's little stages that prepare the field to be able to hold unity, to hold wholeness, to hold transcendent grace, sort of. And that's a little bit different. Otherwise, I think having little result orientations along the way is a perfectly fine and maybe a really great way to establish someone. I mean, you cannot really ever take that last step with them anyway, or for them. And so helping them in every way that you can. I guess it's sort of like all of the components in a rocket that are there to help it, break free from the Earth's gravity, right? Like, you can make sure that none of those components misfire or malfunction or anything like that. And so, there's checks and balances to make sure that all of those components are working. But for them to reach escape velocity, that takes a inner thrust. And so I don't think there's any metric for that. And there's other less grand aspects of that. Like, for instance, the process of orgasm comes to mind. Like, there's certain people who definitely have like trouble getting to that place, or to like expansive whole body orgasm. This is like a topic that seems really parallel here, that you can set up all kinds of physiological things that are result oriented, but that is like a result free circumstance, sort of. So there's certain physiological expressions that are kind of in the realm of the beyond.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's this ladder that the old Vedic texts talk about, which is sort of sneeze, orgasm, enlightenment, and and so sneeze is kind of the same thing. You can't really predict a sneeze. You can create all of the environment for a sneeze to happen, but the sneeze, it has to take that like push from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think results are definitely worthy, but there is this inner inner what's the word, push, sort of this this gravity toward life, this connection, this desire.
constant. It's a constant.
Yeah, it's a constant that eventually overflows, and so that overflowing state is unpredictable, and I don't think is really a result driven thing, but I think maybe it could be measured. So yeah.
We only have almost a minute, but I want to add my 2 cents. One is I came with a memory, which has had me have odd, strange ways of thinking that other people don't think. But all I kept thinking, Heather, as you were talking, Michael, you were talking, not about your talk, but about we're navigating ourselves back to what's natural.
Mm-hmm.
And so results orientation is a step along the way, because something unnatural has been occurring. And we have to track the steps, which would be results. But then there comes this point. In fact, in the group, our global group, we're starting to experience it, like where all these conversations become mute, like the orgasm, the sneeze. I'm not going to get over that for a while. I'll probably be laughing all day. Now I know that my original experience of enlightenment was nothing more than a gigantic sneeze. It brings it back down to a nice level playing field, so I don't get too big for my britches. It's very fun. But I think the really important thing for me is to realize that we're in an interim, that finesse again, we're in an interim movement with creation to give up what we won't need after we do our part. And that's one thing. And then the other thing, we're probably going to go over a minute or two, is that once the system comes back online, which is what you were talking about, Heather, once it comes back online, what are we going to do with ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're just going to have to say, how about if you just come in and let me touch your body? I want to see what's going on. It's like how I write creation exercises. I don't write creation exercises to get anywhere. I write them to see what's happening with creation. And I think that's a great result. But there's no way we can generate that, but we can identify it when it's there, when we're not needed anymore. And then we have to figure out what to do with our time. That's a great problem, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So we can carry this on. So I want to, for those of you that'll watch this, and thank you for all the participation. It's remarkable. The way this was set up is intentional, that we were alone with ourselves. And so you all can have been able to write and comment and share with each other, so that we have this collective event between ourselves and you and yourselves and us and ourselves. It just creates a beautiful pattern of existence, the way that nothing is fully focused nothing is fully focused in one place. It's focused in several places. So in the YouTube, I don't know what it's called, comment or chat, I don't remember. Any questions you have, anything you'd like us to look at, Heather and Michael will be with me next Friday. Anything. I will also put whatever information they have for contact. And I just want to thank you both. It's, I love that we're leaving the conversation hanging, and that we'll see what rises in the field next Friday. Bless you both.